We've got an action-packed Wednesday show first with a Mississippi State preview. Tennessee, 9 o'clock start time tonight. We'll tell you how the Vols match up with the Bulldogs. Josh Ward stops by for Ward Wednesday in segment 2. And Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC had eyes on Tennessee Volunteers in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. He'll stop by in segment 3. All this and more here on a Wednesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome into Locked On Vols. It is your team every single day, and of course, we're talking about the Tennessee Volunteers here on Locked On Vols. It is your first listen each and every day, wherever you get your podcasts. Every single morning, completely free, available on every single platform, and now on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe. Search Locked On Vols on YouTube. The new episode premieres every single morning at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Appreciate your support in both of those realms as we continue to grow this show. Fun show, loaded show coming up here today, and I went ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and start with a Mississippi State preview here as the Volunteers will hit to start Vegas later tonight. And I've been this way, at points in times this week talking about this matchup. I'm going to be super obnoxious about the fact that it's a 9 p.m. start time. That should be illegal for the Eastern Standard Time Zone. It's just complete BS that Tennessee has a 9 p.m. tip-off time, and I'm going to complain about that every single time it happens. I think even, for you guys who wake up for normal times and normal jobs, that's complete BS, but especially for me who has a 4:30 a.m. alarm clock every single morning. Complete crap, but hey, it is what it is, and Tennessee is going to go ahead and do it anyway. So I don't love this matchup for the Volunteers. Mississippi State's incredibly challenging at home in this series for Tennessee. Tennessee does lead this all-time series 86-44, going all the way back to 1924, but the Volunteers just hold a 30-29 edge when the game is played in Starkville. Couple that on with the Bulldogs having a 10-3 start to the season. They split their last 8 games, but they're 12-1 at home this season, including a 5-0 mark in SEC play. You look at that schedule. Again, they started 10-3, and then the last 10 ball games, really since entering SEC play, they've been kind of up, they've been kind of down. Overall record 16-6 on the season for the Volunteers, 7-3 inside the SEC play, and Mississippi State's 14-8, 5-4 inside Southeastern Conference play. So really good out-of-conference schedule, obviously. Kicked things off with a win against Arkansas back at the end of December. That was a good win. Lost to Ole Miss, beat Georgia, beat Alabama. I believe that Alabama win is the lone quadrant 1 win of the season for Alabama. 1-5 record against teams versus against quadrant 1 teams so far. That was the Alabama win all the way back on January the 15th. Lost to Florida, beat Ole Miss, lost to Kentucky, lost to Texas Tech, beat South Carolina, and then is coming off a loss to Arkansas, who's starting to hit its stride at the right time. Of course, that game was on the road as well. So far this season, they have split against Arkansas. They have beaten Alabama, and then they have some losses to – they've split against Ole Miss, and they have some losses to Florida and Kentucky, and a win over South Carolina. So Tennessee comes to town, a team that's playing very, very good. It's won 5 straight SEC games. It's won 5 of its last 6 ball games. Of course, that hiccup with the Big 12 SEC Challenge at Texas. And that's kind of the way the schedules look like for Mississippi State. But it's a very good team at home this season. Again, I mentioned it's 12-1 at home so far this year, 0-5 on the road, 2-2 in neutral site ball games. So for Mississippi State, it's all about the junior guard, Iverson Mulliner. And of course, if you have a name like Iverson, you're going to be good at basketball, right? He's averaging 18.2 points per game this season. In 9 SEC games, he is leading the conference in scoring at 20.6 points per game. So he's a guy that's going to put the ball through the bottom of the net. That's just, he's going to get his. You got to try to slow down everybody else and try to get a hand in his face. Also, Iverson Mulliner is scoring a 49.1% clip from the field. That leads all guards in the SEC. And that's, third in the conference, I do believe, but 49.1% shooting clip from the field. That is really, really good. So Tennessee's got to slow down Iverson Mulliner, who again on the season, 18.2 points per game for Mississippi State. Also, looks like Tolu Smith's going to be back. He came back. He's only played in 9 games this season, started every single one of those for Mississippi State, but he's battled a bunch of injuries. He is a redshirt junior forward, and he came back in that loss to Arkansas on Saturday. He's very effective when he's in the lineup, averaging 12.6 points per game, 6.6 rebounds per game, but again, in only 9 starts, 9 games played so far this season. You look at the ESPN matchup predictor on, of course, the ESPN app. It's giving Tennessee a 63.3% chance of victory. Mississippi State only a 36.7% chance of victory. And at the time of this recording, there's not been a line set for this ball game. But again, it is a late one coming up tonight. And so at the time of this recording, Monday evening or Tuesday evening, that line has not been set yet. So you want to challenge right out of the gate. You don't have Olivier Nkamhoua the rest of the way, likely the rest of the way. You definitely don't have him coming up tonight. This is your challenge. This is going to be an absolute challenge. What's that starting 5 going to look like? But more importantly, what's the best 5 going to look like? And the best 5 can change every single game. But the game notes coming out which are just projected starters. It doesn't mean that they're starters, trust me. But it has Justin Powell in the starting lineup, Josiah at the 4, and Uros at the 5. That is a starting lineup that I could see being trotted out there. You want to keep Zakai Ziegler on the bench, as we've talked about on this show plenty of times. We'll talk about it a little bit with Josh coming up here in just a moment as well. You want to keep Zakai on the bench. You have some options to where you can bring in Fulke, play him at the 5. You can obviously have Uros at the 5. You can have Brendan Huntley Hatfield at the 5. You can have Jonas Adu at the 4, Jemai Mashak at the 4. You've got some options here, lineup flexibility, but I do think Tennessee plays some of its best ball when it's playing small ball. And at that point in time, it was Olivier Nkamhoua at the 5 and Josiah at the 4. Now it'll be a true 5 at the 5, whether it be Uros or Fulke or BHH, and Josiah Jordan James at the 4. So it's going to be a challenge for Tennessee, no doubt about it. But hey, you gotta move on. The good thing about Tennessee is you have options. Sure, losing Olivier Nkamhoua, it's challenging. He was really starting to find his rhythm offensively. He is Tennessee's best rim defender. I've rim protector. I've mentioned that a couple of times. You're really going to miss his defensive presence. But you got to start somewhere, right? And I still think Tennessee has the ability to obviously make the tournament, go to the second round like we talked about yesterday. But that offense has got to be consistent as it has been the last couple of games. And so first true test will be tonight at Mississippi State, a really tough place to play. A couple of things I want to bring up real quick before we welcome on Josh Ward for Ward Wednesday. This is the most impactful defenders in the country, according to the defensive BPR at the evanmaya.com listing. Okay. So most impactful defenders in the country. Josiah Jordan James is the second most impactful defender in the entire country per this metric. Josiah Jordan James, that's saying a whole lot. He's right behind Eric Gaines of LSU and right in front of Gabe, what's his name, from West Virginia. Can't say his last name. So that's one stat I wanted to bring up. Also, I don't know how familiar you guys are with barttorvik.com. I am trying to familiarize myself with this as we get on through basketball season. It's like advanced metrics to the max, then times 10. It's like analytics and all that with baseball. That's kind of how it is with basketball. And a really interesting stat that I found out earlier on Tuesday. Tennessee's seasons Tennessee's plus minus average on the season. So if you check the individual box score each and every game, probably not on your ESPN app, it's not available there. But if you check the box score the UT Athletics sends out from their stat program, it gives a plus minus for every single game. Which player, on this court, the team was +5 when this player was on the court. The team was -3 when this player was on the court. Tennessee has 3 players that are in the minus, averaging minus in the plus minus on the season. Brandon Huntley Hatfield is -0.6. Victor Bailey Jr. is -1.7. Now, Victor Bailey Jr., his minutes have diminished an awful lot. He's starting to get them back up a little bit more, but again, he's not playing as much as the other. Same kind of with Brandon Huntley Hatfield. But the other one is Uros Plavsic. He is at a -0.1 on the season, and again, in the average for the plus minus. Hope you guys are following me here. I'm probably not doing a great job of describing it, but for the season, on average, your plus minus, Uros Plavsic is minus 0.1. That is shocking to me because Uros has been starting for quite a minute. He's been playing a lot really all season long, but he's been in that rotation he's been in the starting lineup for Tennessee really since Tennessee's turned the corner and early on since SEC play. But Uros Plavsic, 0.1, minus 0.1 on the season in the plus minus. Now, he can flip-flop back and forth a couple of times before the season's over. I mean, he's right on that line. If you want to look at the polar opposite in terms of who's averaging well into the plus, no surprise. You have Jonas Adu, but he's only, a percentage of the minutes played, 1.7, so that doesn't really count. Santiago Vescovi is his percentage of the minutes played, 73.3. He's at plus 10.2. So that's really, really solid. The next closest would be Josiah Jordan-James at plus 6.6. Quentin DeBunje is in there at 7.1, but again, he only averages 3.6% of the minutes played this season. So I found that very, very interesting. But nonetheless, Tennessee on the road tonight at 9 o'clock at Mississippi State. It's going to be a challenging game, and we'll have to see how this team responds following the loss to Olivier Nkamhoua. All right. We're more on this matchup. Sorry, just real quick. Adjusted offensive efficiency for Mississippi State, 28th in the country. They're averaging 117.1 points per 100 possessions. Adjusted defensive efficiency, Mississippi State is 79th in the country at 98.1 points per 100 possessions given up. So Tennessee's about at 31, I believe, in the adjusted offensive efficiency. Tennessee is 8th in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency. So 79th to 8th on the defensive side, Tennessee's in favor. 28 to about 31 or 32 on the offensive side, which Mississippi State is in favor in that adjusted efficiency rating. Should be a good one. Should be a late one, but I still think Tennessee can win this game, but I'm not in love with the matchup. I'm going to be completely honest with you there. All right, Josh Ward coming up here next with a little Ward Wednesday action. But before we get to Josh, Built Bar, this is the time of the year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, right? Not necessarily me, but I'm speaking for the majority of us because you know that to be true. But on this year, I'm sticking to my resolutions to eat right, and that's thanks to Built Bar, okay? It's almost feels like it's not even really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the new Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best Built Bars and best tasting Built Bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. And these are going to be your new favorites. All Built Bars, not just the Puffs, but they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, the Puffs included. Again, that is 100% real chocolate. Only about 130 calories on average, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. That is the kicker right there. Where can you find all these flavors like the new Puffs and more? That's it all at Built.com. Go to Built.com, use that promo code LOCK15, and you're going to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. That's all at Built.com. It's Super Week, and that's brought to you by GetUpside. There's no better place to get you coverage of the big game than on the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams, they're all in LA all week long covering the big game. So go ahead and check out all that as the Rams and the Bengals get set for, again, the big game coming up on Sunday. We are bringing in a big guest right now. His name is Josh Ward for Ward Wednesday. Josh, how we doing today, man?
Hey, doing great. Great to be on.
Yeah, so obviously the big news here for this Tennessee basketball beat is the absence of Olivier Nkamhoua, likely for the remainder of the season with a left ankle injury. Went down against South Carolina. Didn't think, of course, you just never know, right after the game. But at the time, didn't think it'd be that bad. He came back taped up, but ultimately surgery is going to be required. Looks like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. How big of a loss is this for Rick Barnes and the Tennessee basketball team?
My initial reaction is it's a big loss because Olivier is starting and playing important minutes for a reason. I think he's their biggest post threat on the offensive end because of his ability to make some plays around the basket, but also extend what Tennessee does offensively. He's the only outside shooting threat so far that we've seen from Tennessee's post players. Now he's unavailable. And then on the defensive end, I've liked what Olivier has done this season, and that is now taken away. So that puts pressure on other guys, one of those being a veteran who's played a lot, John Fulkerson, who will have to step up with Olivier Nkamhoua being out. And he is a replaceable player, but only if other players who have been behind him are ready to play at a higher level more consistently. It puts more pressure on other players, no doubt.
Yeah, so the $1 million question will be who is going to replace those minutes, and I think it can be kind of a trick question because, as you pointed out, you mentioned John Fulkerson, but I think it's not just John Fulkerson. I think it's Uros Plavsic. I think those two guys, you'll see those minutes increase. I think you'll see a little bit more from maybe Brandon Huntley Hatfield, maybe Jemai Meshack playing the four, but ultimately, I think we're going to see a new guard inserted in the lineup, probably Justin Powell, and then sliding Triple J over down to the four. What do you see, at least? And again, there'll be different combinations, but maybe first five out there coming up later tonight.
Yeah, the small ball lineup has been their best lineup, and that's with Josiah Jordan James at the four. He is such an important player. You've talked about him on this podcast, rightfully so, because he helps determine what Tennessee is able to do on the court. But with Olivier unavailable, he's the guy that I like the best at the five spot a lot of the time with Josiah at the four. So that still alters things. Maybe Huntley Hatfield is ready to play a bigger role. The coaching staff to this point has not thought so, but they will maybe test it out to see. Jemai Meshack's a guy that they really like, and he's gotten some minutes sparingly, but there's no doubt that he comes off the bench to add some energy and explosiveness into the lineup. Maybe he can do that a little bit more, but I still come back to Fulkerson. If you're looking for a big chunk of minutes, he's already been playing a good amount. He could play a little bit more now because of Olivier's absence. And then Uros, I don't think you're looking to expand his role much more. Maybe depending on the matchup, we'll see with the Auburn game with Walker Kessler, but game in, game out, I'm not looking to expand his role too much more. So lineup construction to me is the big question, but small ball from Tennessee has worked. Let's see if they work on it more.
Josh Ward joining the show here for Ward Wednesday. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Josh_Ward. Of course, he is the co-host of Sports 180 on 99.1 The Sports Animal, and of course, the former host here of Locked On Vols. Josh, long-term projections, the loss to Olivier Nkamhoua doesn't feel good, of course, but does this change what this team, can do in terms of making the tournament, in terms of going potentially to the second round, or does that wipe some of that off the table with they're going to be a tournament team, don't get me wrong, but with the loss of Olivier Nkamhoua, does that change your season projection for Tennessee drastically?
No, not too much, because I think the reason we could be optimistic that Tennessee can still finish strong and win at least a couple of games in the NCAA tournament to get to the Sweet 16 would be the improved play of the backcourt, what Kennedy Chandler and Zakai Ziegler have continued to do, the recent production from Josiah Jordan James in the offensive end, to go with how important and effective he is as a defensive player, is what gives this team the biggest upside. Vescovi has just been so consistent over the course of the season. If Justin Powell can be a guy that knocks down shots more regularly for you off the bench, then Tennessee's going to have a chance to win games in March. Now, if they go cold again, or their offense struggles, the defense is going to be there, I think, no matter what. But if you're in that kind of game, look at Texas with the most recent loss, you know what the result can be. So it's going to be difficult, but I don't change my projection or the potential of this basketball team because of Olivier's injury. Makes it more difficult. I'd much rather have him than not, but Tennessee can still hit a lot of its goals when it gets to March.
I'll tell you one thing I wouldn't change up, and that would be bringing Zakai Ziegler off the bench. He is such a spark plug. I continue to use, that phrase, that adjective to describe him. That's what he is. He's a spark plug, and provides so much scoring energy on both ends of the court coming off the bench. Recently named the SEC Freshman of the Week, and the legend of Zakai Ziegler just continues to grow, and it's easy to show why he is a fan favorite. He'll be around here in Knoxville for quite some time.
Yeah, he's a really good player for Tennessee right now. He'll get better. He'll continue to play a bigger role, but I would continue to have him come off the bench. I think that's good for what Tennessee does within its rotation at the start of the game. And we spend so much time talking about the starting five and rarely talk about the crunch time five. That's where he matters more. So, and I know you could say, well, don't you want to get off to a better start? But I think there is some added help with him coming in off the bench. That can be overlooked too. So I would continue having him play that role and still have Zakai play a lot of minutes coming off the bench. But the progress of Chandler and Ziegler both, I think, is why we can be optimistic about what Tennessee can do. Now, also, if you have Chandler and Zakai in the starting lineup together, you do maybe run into some defensive issues with their size. But just overall, they're really important players for Tennessee. They both can make plays in Tennessee's offense, and they both can create offense with the way they use their hands and cause deflections, take the ball away on the defensive end of the floor. So let's not overlook what the defense has been able to do recently to help the offense find more opportunities. If they can get more transition opportunities, that would continue to help elevate Tennessee's play. But Zakai, no doubt, is one of the biggest bright spots on the season.
Yeah, I said this on the pod earlier this week. I think the term starter in really any sports is the most overused phrase and overrated, really, quite frankly, just because it's, you mentioned it there, it's about crunch time, not your first five, it's your last five, crunch time out there.
I think it actually matters more at the start of the second half than the first half. Because at that point, you figured out where you are in the game. You've probably made some kind of adjustment depending on what the other team is doing to you or how they're playing. So the starting five coming out of halftime to me matters more than the starting five at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, like a guy like Zakai Ziegler is still getting 25 to 27 minutes on average right now. So it's not like he's not getting any playing time. And like the case for a defensive lineman, I mean, that's a rotational group. You get tons of guys that play a ton of snaps instead of those first four that are just out there. So anyway, you got Mississippi State coming up tonight. The beautiful, beautiful 9 p.m. start time. It's in Stark, Vegas. You travel there one time. It's one time too many. When you do morning radio, it's a beautiful thing. At 11 o'clock, you're starting a podcast, that whole editing process. Can't wait for that. But that's coming up tonight. Mississippi State, a good team at home, but not a very good team against Quadrant 1 teams. Your thoughts on the matchup tonight? I don't like the matchup from a size perspective, and Tennessee just playing in Starkville. I think 30-29 overall. It's a tough place to play.
Well, if you want to look for your first real test without Olivier Nkamhoua, here it is, because this is the team that does not shoot a bunch of threes. They're very effective on 2-point shooting and trying to score around the basket. So let's see how Tennessee responds without Olivier. And maybe we'll see some contrasting style a little bit. This is one of those games where at the end of it, we'll probably pull up the box score. We'll look at turnovers. We'll look at shooting percentages at each level, including the free throw line. And that's going to be what determines who wins this game. So it sounds like I'm trying to simplify it because I am. And that's why Olivier on the defensive end, I think, is the loss. And let's see how Tennessee responds. Rebounding the basketball, that's where I think Rick Barnes goes to John Fulkerson and say, hey, we can figure out scoring. We have guys that can score. Look at what they've done recently, especially shooting the basketball. We need rebounds. We cannot allow second chance opportunities to Mississippi State and to teams in the future. Get the basketball. So that's what I think he'll talk to the big guys about doing. And then, of course, getting defensive stops around the basket.
Last but not least, not Tennessee related, but you look at what's going on the Plains right now. Oh, my goodness. You talk about just a crapshoot over there. At this point, and things may change by the time of this recording, but it's impossible to bring back Brian Harsin right now, right? And again, you missed your window of hiring coaches. The Boosters they're trying to find reasons to fire him for cause. It's just not a good fit. Dude's on vacation right now. Doesn't have any coordinators. I mean, it can't get much worse in Auburn right now, can it?
It wouldn't seem so. Now, Auburn's a place that can always find a way to make it worse. That place is special. I've long maintained that it is the best representative if you have to explain everything that is college football to somebody who knows nothing about it because of all the success they can have, the way they can bottom out quickly, everything that happens behind the scenes. The absurdity of college football is it's all right there on the plane. So they're a year in. I don't know how it's in either party's best interest to move forward. Really, it's probably about, okay, how much money can you save in this process if you're on Auburn's side? And then if you're Brian Harsin and you're Brian Harsin's attorney, it's about making sure you get every dime that you believe you're owed in that contract. So it's really an ugly situation, but it's perfect Auburn football.
And how much money are you getting to rep 5-star preps and Jesse Smithy right now?
He actually charged me to put this on there. So, yeah, proud supporter of 5-Star Preps and the work that Jesse Smithy does locally here in East Tennessee.
Yeah, be careful now. You're not the host of this podcast anymore. You're not bringing in that ginormous paycheck every month, so you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I don't have any say with the NIL deals anymore that happens with Locked On Vols or the Locked On Podcast Network.
Josh Ward, give a follow on Twitter at Josh_Ward. Listen to him on Sports 180. Weekdays noon to 3 on 99.1 The Sports Animal. Josh, thanks so much, man. We will chat with you again next Wednesday.
You got it. Thanks, Eric.
All right, always a good time catching up with Josh Ward. Really, really fun dude to talk sports with and just to hang out with. That is Josh Ward. Of course, you guys know him as well. All right, Bet Online. It's got you covered all season long with props, odds, and lines more than ever before. Football season continues. It's March to the playoffs. And hey, don't look now, that big game just a couple of days away. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just football either. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with real-time updates on all the current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all these new amazing offers available for 2022 and beyond. Go check it out right now. It's betonline.net. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. All right, we got a last segment here on a Wednesday, Locked On Vols. Welcome back into it. Big thanks to Josh Ward for stopping by the show. And now I want to welcome on another guest from the Locked On podcast family. He is the host of Locked On SEC, and his name is Chris Gordy. Chris, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, Eric? Good to be here, man. And yeah, it's crazy. The Senior Bowl's already come and gone. Before we know it, it'll be the draft. And then before we know it, it'll be well into the summer ball and we'll have kickoff again. So as much as it stinks that the college football season came to an end just a couple weeks ago, it'll be back before we know it.
Yeah, it will. And especially in our industry, we spend all year long talking about football only for it to, just come and go in the blink of an eye. But it just kind of is what it is. Real quick, before we get into Senior Bowl talk, SEC baseball is coming up here in just a matter of less than 2 weeks. You'll kick off the non-conference schedule, some of those big-time tournaments. Tennessee with Tony Vitello. Real quick, what are your thoughts on Tennessee baseball, its perspectives this year trying to get back to Omaha?
Yeah, I think the offense is going to be good. Some questions with the pitching, obviously with the Tidwell injury and what happens there. I've heard everything from significant time to he'll miss no time and or little time and be back very soon. So
well, he's going to miss some time, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean that's what I heard, but then I had somebody saying, "Oh, don't be surprised if he's back sooner rather than later." So I don't know. We'll see, but obviously it's incumbent on other guys to step up and I think he's built up a lot of excitement with last year and I think he's committed to staying at the university. Obviously, there were some people swooping in and interested in stealing him away, but Tony Vitello is committed. And look, I think in the pecking order in the East, Vandy's going to be loaded once again. But outside of them, I think Florida had a disappointing year last year. I think they bounced back up. But I'd put Tennessee somewhere right in there, third in the East. And it's crazy to say third in the East might mean you're ranked 11th in the country. Like that's how ridiculously loaded the SEC will be this year. So I think Tennessee's going to be fine, but pitching is the big one that they got to settle in with the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday starters, and they'll get that figured out.
Yeah, SEC baseball is much like recruiting rankings. You could be 11th in the nation, but 7th in the SEC. It's just kind of the way it's so competitive, especially in SEC baseball. But bringing on the show to talk a little Senior Bowl, we talked with Zach, Locked On Auburn last week. We talked to VFL and NFL veteran, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ramon Foster, on his experience and All-Star game. So trying to get more voices who were down there to see, Cade Mays, Alante Taylor, and Bayless Jones Jr. in action throughout the week. You were down there. Anything stick out noteworthy-wise from the trio of Tennessee players?
Well, there was a lot of focus on Bayless, obviously, being a Mobile guy. There was, everybody and their brother wanted to interview him, and there was a lot of focus on that. But I think, from a scout perspective, how good he is as a return man. And obviously, the more you can do in the NFL, the better when you show that versatility. So I don't know if everybody was, that concerned with him in the return game. I think the focus all week was they wanted to see him as a true wide receiver. And what are you? Are you a deep threat that takes the top off the defense? Or are you, that possession guy? Or, almost like I compare to, and by no means am I saying he's the same player, he's going to translate to this, but like Tyreek Hill. You think about a lot of times he makes the big plays, but a lot of times with Tyreek, he catches a short pass and then breaks away. I could see Velas as kind of that kind of guy where, he catches a 5-yard slant or, a quick go route, and then he breaks it, for a long gain. I could see him possibly being in that category. And, saw him throughout the week of practice, made some great catches. I mean, I think Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl singled him out as one of the best practice players all week, and just went about his business. And he did it with all the different quarterbacks, whether it was Bailey Zappi or Sam Howell, whoever it was. He was catching everything. I didn't see him drop one ball all week. I'm sure he did. I wasn't at every practice, but every time I saw him running routes, he was catching everything. So was happy for Velas. I think he helped his draft stock. And look, he was the leading receiver for his team after the game. So I think that helped. Alante Taylor, a lot of people, had a focus on him as a cover guy. Is he better served playing the left side, right side? Can he be nickel? I think there were a lot of scouts asking what his role is going to be at the next level, but obviously getting an interception in the game helps. And, just another stat on his resume checklist. So I like Alante. We'll see where he translates at the next level. But Cade Mays is the one that intrigues me the most because, man, all week long, there was they moved him all around. I mean, he played right guard, he played right tackle, he played center. Every time I spent a good time watching the offensive linemen because there were so many SEC guys there. I mean, you had a couple of the Georgia guys, you had a couple of the Kentucky guys, an LSU guy, and then Cade Mays was in there. And it was funny because they kind of all stuck together. I interviewed Darian Kennard the other day from Kentucky, and he said, "Yeah, I don't know what it is, whether it was the SEC bond or just that we're all fat guys and we just stick together." But Cade Mays kind of had that rapport with those guys. And look, let's be honest, he knew the Georgia guys already, so that bond kind of helped with Jamari Salyer and those guys. But I think Cade Mays is a guy who maybe helped himself this week, just showing the versatility. But I think also you start to get them in the question in a lot of scouts' minds on what are you? Are you a guard? Are you a center? Where do you translate at the next level? So I'll be curious to see, but man, he was an easy guy to root for in his time at Tennessee, and had some injuries along the way. But I think all three guys, for the most part, at the end of the week, you look back and said all three of them were pretty impressive.
All right, I don't want to let this go without being noticed here. You heard it here first. Chris Gordy locked on SEC. Bayless Jones, Tyreek Hill. So
no. I'm just saying, like, from that standpoint, like, honestly, like, I think he would be great in a Sean Payton offense, and obviously, I should say Saints offense. Sean Payton's retired now, but like, the Saints have had a history of bringing in Tennessee wide receivers. Marquez Callaway is there right now, but I'd love to see him in that offense where he can catch the quick pass, take it, and go. But I think he translates more, especially in year one, as a special teams guy who's going to be a return man. And again, in NFL, they're always looking for guys like that.
Let's go back to Cade Mays here. And again, I wasn't there. I didn't have boots on the ground, so I can only go off of people I've spoken to and things I've read, because as you and I were talking backstage, everybody and their mother was there covering this thing. Read a lot that Cade Mays didn't look that impressive in practice. Maybe it's because he was moving around so much and just trying to get a feel for every position, repping with different guys around him. But I heard he got blown off the ball a little bit. Heard he had some penalties in practice. Did you see any of that from Cade? I think just the fact that his versatility, the fact that he can play everything, and the fact that I think all intents and purposes, the game he played fine in. But did you see any of that at all? You're not going to win every single rep, but did you see any of that in those individual practice sessions?
I saw one play where he got beat, but on that day, when I was watching the offensive line the day, everybody was getting beat. I mean, John Ridgway from Arkansas, who's just a monster, was beating everybody on the interior. So I didn't really judge him for that because, that was one of the early practices. Most of the guys were getting beat. Again, when I saw him, he was holding up well, particularly run blocking. They did that a lot on the second day. Tyler Beatty and Damian Pierce from Florida, they both broke off some long runs running on that right side. So again, it's a mixed bag. It all depends on who was watching and when. Like I said, I thought overall, I thought when I saw him play, I thought he played well. I mean, I tried to keep an eye on him in the Senior Bowl, and I mean, he played, a good bit of snaps throughout that game, and particularly on a couple of the drives where they, went long and got into scoring range and all that. He was in the game. So, again, we'll see what happens at the pro days and what the measurables are. And, if he runs a fast 40 and has a good long jump, suddenly these guys start bumping up 2 rounds. And it's like, a lot of this stuff is just stuff that the scouts and teams fall in love with.
Yep, he's certainly a fun guy to root for, a guy that can kind of do it all. And I think that versatility is going to be big for him. When healthy, he's certainly a force. It's just the durability thing with Cade has always been the issue. Last thing, you look at Alante Taylor. He's played nothing but cornerback at this level. He's pretty much walked on, was playing cornerback from day one. I do not believe he is a nickel. I don't think that he's a star type player. I can see him playing safety at the next level. Did you see him get any reps at safety? I've read somewhere where he was repping a little bit at safety, but mostly at corner. Obviously had that interception. It's funny because he got beat on the route, but he adjusted well, and the ball was a little underthrown. He made a great athletic catch, and so credit to him. More on Alante Taylor, and if you saw him any lineup at all at safety this past week.
I didn't see him at safety, but that's an interesting thought, with his range and what he would look like playing safety at the next level. But what you just mentioned, I mean, it happens so often in the NFL. Guys do get, starting corners get beat. That's what happens. But it's how you adjust. And if you can make a play on the ball still and get your hands on it and particularly, intercept it, like those are all things that the scouts just love to see. So, yeah, I wouldn't sweat him getting beat, but that's intriguing. I'd like to see him a little bit more at safety and see how he translates the next level. But I'm with you. I don't think he's a nickel guy. I think he's a true cover corner. I think he could be a number 2 to somebody. Like, for instance, if he goes to the Rams, Jalen Ramsey's your number 1. I could see him sliding in as a number 2, competing for that spot. So yeah, I'll be curious to see, but wherever he goes, I hope we still get free cookies,
Exactly. Everybody here in Knoxville loved that. I mean, he struck at that NIL deal, had a couple of picks early in the season, and the lines were out the door. Chris, I know you're going to be covering the SEC players as they continue on throughout, as you mentioned, the pro days, the combine, all throughout that draft process. Baseball season is right around the corner. You get some great interviews on your show. What's coming up the rest of the week, and what do we have to look forward to on Locked On SEC?
Well, next week, we're going to start getting into a little bit more on the baseball talk. I'll have interviews with the 2 new coaches in the SEC, Jay Johnson at LSU and Jim Schlossnagle over at A&M. Also going to have a conversation with Dylan Cruz, who's the star player for LSU, who's a phenomenal freshman year for him. He's a guy they already have slated as a top 5 pick in the draft in a couple of years. So good conversations with them. Again, I'm a big college baseball fan, and I thought last season was such a fun SEC baseball season, and now we're getting back to the stadiums that were still a little limited fan wise. Sounds like are going to be full go 100%. I know Auburn just sold out their season tickets. Auburn's not even expected to be a top team in the West, but they're selling out their season tickets. So that just shows you the passion of the SEC fan bases across baseball. So we'll talk that. We'll still continue to cover SEC basketball. I know Tennessee's like a roller coaster this season that they're having. Hopefully they can figure it out come tournament time. But we'll talk about that. And then also we'll just have some other special guests join us along the way, some football players that are currently on teams. We had TJ Finley from Auburn on last week talking about his quarterback battle. Is Brian Harsing going to be the guy? We'll see. But some great interviews we'll have all throughout spring practice. And I know all the spring game dates are starting to get announced. So really excited to see what the orange and white will look like, particularly with Josh Heupel heading into year 2.
Yeah, it's likely going to be in Nashville at Nissan Stadium. Not sure why they haven't made that official. I think it's going to be a spring game that kind of splits. It's going to be weird, kind of splits the difference. You're going to start spring practice for a couple of weeks, have your game, and then practice again for a couple of weeks. Obviously, renovations going on in Neyland Stadium. So that's likely what's going to happen. They'll make an official call here pretty soon. Surprised they haven't already. Also, you said it there. Much like you're on Rocky Top, there is never a dull moment on the plains with Auburn. This is truly incredible what's happening right now. So look forward to having all your coverage on what's going on with the Auburn situation and everything else over at Locked On SEC. Chris, thanks so much, man.
Sure, Eric. Anytime, man.
All right, Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Make that your second listen every single day. I talk about it. I'm a big fan of his work. I have him on the radio show often. He does a fantastic job covering all the SEC, not just Tennessee, not just Kentucky or LSU, but all the SEC, all sports. Plenty of coverage over there. Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy. Make that your second listen behind your first listen, which, of course, is Locked On Vols. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Premieres every single morning at 9 a.m. You can go back and check all the episodes on demand. Appreciate your support in growing the show. I mentioned the other day we had 300 subs in a little over 2 weeks. Now we're up to 330. Can't thank you enough. The goal is 1,000. Support the show on YouTube, and we'll always appreciate that. We'll come back with some more recap and talk about Tennessee's game happening later tonight against Mississippi State. That's what we had to look forward to on tomorrow's Locked On Vols. And until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody.